Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Indonesia. Indonesia, officially the Republic of Indonesia, is a unitary sovereign state and transcontinental country located mainly in Southeast Asia with some territories in Oceania. Situated between the Indian and Pacific Oceans, it is the world's largest island country, with more than 17,000 islands. Indonesia is the world's 14th largest country in terms of land area, and world's 7th largest country in terms of combined sea and land area. It has an estimated population of over 260 million people, and is the world's 4th most populous country, the most populous Austronesian nation, as well as the most populous Muslim-majority country. The world's most populous island, Java, contains more than half of the country's population. Indonesia's republican form of government includes an elected legislature and president. Indonesia has 34 provinces, of which 5 have special administrative status. Its capital and country's most populous city is Jakarta, which is also the most populous city in Southeast Asia and the second in Asia. The country shares land borders with Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and the eastern part of Malaysia. Other neighboring countries include Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines, Australia, Palau, and the Indian territory of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Despite its large population and densely populated regions, Indonesia has vast areas of wilderness that support the world's second highest level of biodiversity. The country has abundant natural resources like oil and natural gas, tin, copper, and gold. Agriculture mainly produces rice, palm oil, tea, coffee, cacao, medicinal plants, spices, and rubber. Indonesia's major trading partners are Japan, United States, China, and the surrounding countries of Singapore, Malaysia and Australia. The Indonesian archipelago has been an important region for trade since at least the 7th century, when Srivijaya and then later Majapahit traded with China and India. Local rulers gradually absorbed foreign cultural, religious and political models from the early centuries CE, and Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms flourished. Indonesian history has been influenced by foreign powers drawn to its natural resources. Muslim traders and Sufi scholars brought the now dominant Islam, while European powers brought Christianity and fought one another to monopolize trade in the Spice Islands of Maluku during the Age of Discovery. Following 3.5 centuries of Dutch colonialism starting from Amboina and Batavia, and eventually all of the archipelago including Timor and Western New Guinea, at times interrupted by Portuguese, French and British rule, Indonesia secured its independence after World War II. Indonesia consists of hundreds of distinct native ethnic and linguistic groups, with the largest, and politically dominant, ethnic group being the Javanese. The population is unevenly spread throughout the islands within a variety of habitats and levels of development, ranging from the megalopolis of Jakarta to uncontacted tribes in the east. A shared identity has developed, defined by a national language, ethnic diversity, religious pluralism within a Muslim-majority population, and a history of colonialism and rebellion against it. Indonesia's national motto, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, articulates the diversity that shapes the country. Indonesia's economy is the world's 16th largest by nominal GDP and the 7th largest by GDP at PPP, the largest in Southeast Asia, and is considered an emerging market. A newly industrialized country, Indonesia has been a member of the United Nations since 1950. Indonesia was an organizer of the Bandung Conference and was the founder of Non-Aligned Movement, and also the founding member of Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, East Asia Summit, and Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Indonesia is a member of the G20 major economies and World Trade Organization. Etymology. The name Indonesia derives from the Greek name of the Indos and the word Nessos, meaning Indian islands. The name dates to the 18th century, far predating the formation of independent Indonesia. In 1850, George Windsor, an English ethnologist, proposed the terms Indonesians, and, his preference, Malayunesians, for the inhabitants of the Indian archipelago and Malayan archipelago. In the same publication, one of his students, James Richardson Logan, used Indonesia as a synonym for Indian archipelago. However, Dutch academics writing in East Indies publications were reluctant to use Indonesia. They preferred Malay archipelago, the Netherlands East Indies, popularly Indi, the East, and Insuland. After 1900, Indonesia became more common in academic circles outside the Netherlands, and Indonesian nationalist groups adopted it for political expression. Adolf Bastian, of the University of Berlin, popularized the name through his book Indonesia Ode Inseln des Malaysian Archipels, 1884–1894. The first Indonesian scholar to use the name was Suwardi Suyanengrat, when in 1913 he established a press bureau in the Netherlands, Indonesische Persbureau. Early history. Fossils and the remains of tools show that the Indonesian archipelago was inhabited by Homo erectus, known as Java man, between 1.5 million years ago and 35,000 years ago. Homo sapiens reached the region by around 45,000 years ago. Austronesian peoples, who form the majority of the modern population, migrated to Southeast Asia from Taiwan. They arrived in Indonesia around 2000 BCE, and as they spread through the archipelago, confined the indigenous Melanesian peoples to the Far Eastern regions. Ideal agricultural conditions, and the mastering of wet field rice cultivation as early as the 8th century BCE, allowed villages, towns, and small kingdoms to flourish by the 1st century CE. Indonesia's strategic sea lane position fostered inter-island and international trade, including links with Indian kingdoms and China, which were established several centuries BCE. Trade has since fundamentally shaped Indonesian history. From the 7th century CE, the powerful Srivijaya naval kingdom flourished as a result of trade and the influences of Hinduism and Buddhism that were imported with it. Between the 8th and 10th centuries CE, the agricultural Buddhist Sailendra and Hindu Mataram dynasties thrived and declined in inland Java, leaving grand religious monuments such as Borobudur, Sewu, and Prambanan. This period marked a renaissance of Hindu-Buddhist art in ancient Java. Around the first quarter of the 10th century, the center of the kingdom was shifted from Mataram area in central Java to Brantas River Valley in East Java by Mpu Sindok, who established the Isyana dynasty. Subsequently, series of Javanese Hindu-Buddhist polities rise and fall, from Kahuripan Kingdom ruled by Airlangga to Kadiri and Singhasari. In West Java, Sunda Kingdom was re-established circa 1030 according to Sanghyang Tapak inscription. In Bali, the Warmadewas established their rule on the Kingdom of Bali in the 10th century. The Hindu Majapahit Kingdom was founded in eastern Java in the late 13th century, and under Gajah Mada, its influence stretched over much of Indonesia. Colonial era. Although Muslim traders first traveled through Southeast Asia early in the Islamic era, The earliest evidence of Islamized populations in Indonesia dates to the 13th century in northern Sumatra. Other Indonesian areas gradually adopted Islam, and it was the dominant religion in Java and Sumatra by the end of the 16th century. For the most part, Islam overlaid and mixed with existing cultural and religious influences, which shaped the predominant form of Islam in Indonesia, particularly in Java. The first regular contact between Europeans and the peoples of Indonesia began in 1512, when Portuguese traders, led by Francisco Serrao, sought to monopolize the sources of nutmeg, cloves, and cubeb pepper in Maluku. Dutch and British traders followed. In 1602, the Dutch established the Dutch East India Company, and in following decades, the Dutch gained foothold in Batavia and Amboina. Throughout 17th and 18th centuries, the company became the dominant European power in the archipelago. Following bankruptcy, the VOC was formally dissolved in 1800, and the government of the Netherlands established the Dutch East Indies as a nationalized colony. For most of the colonial period, Dutch control over the archipelago was tenuous outside of coastal strongholds. Only in the early 20th century did Dutch dominance extend to what was to become Indonesia's current boundaries. Japanese occupation during World War II ended Dutch rule, and encouraged the previously suppressed Indonesian independence movement. Despite major internal political, social and sectarian divisions during the National Revolution, Indonesians, on the whole, found unity in their fight for independence. Modern era. A UN report stated that 4 million people died in Indonesia as a result of famine and forced labor during the Japanese occupation. 2 days after the surrender of Japan in August 1945, Sukarno, an influential nationalist leader, declared independence and was appointed president. The Netherlands tried to re-establish the rule, and an armed and diplomatic struggle ended in December 1949, when, in the face of international pressure, the Dutch formally recognized Indonesian independence. Sukarno moved Indonesia from democracy towards authoritarianism, and maintained his power base by balancing the opposing forces of the military and the Communist Party of Indonesia. An attempted coup on 30 September 1965 was countered by the army, which led a violent anti-communist purge, during which the PKI was blamed for the coup and effectively destroyed. Large-scale killings took place which targeted communists, ethnic Chinese and alleged leftists. The most widely accepted estimates are that between 500,000 and 1 million people were killed, with some estimates as high as 2 to 3 million. The head of the military, General Suharto, outmaneuvered the politically weak and Sukarno, and was formally appointed president in March 1968. His new order administration was supported by the U.S. government, and encouraged foreign direct investment in Indonesia, which was a major factor in the subsequent 3 decades of substantial economic growth. However, the authoritarian new order was widely accused of corruption and suppression of political opposition. Indonesia was the country hardest hit by the late 1990s Asian financial crisis. This increased popular discontent with the new order, and led to popular protest across the country. Suharto resigned on 21 May 1998. In 1999, East Timor voted to secede from Indonesia, after a 25-year military occupation that was marked by international condemnation of repression of the East Timorese. Since Suharto's resignation, a strengthening of democratic processes has included a regional autonomy program, and the first direct presidential election in 2004, which was won by Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, who went on to win a second term in 2009. Political and economic instability, social unrest, corruption, and terrorism slowed progress, however. In the last 5 years the economy has performed strongly. Although relations among different religious and ethnic groups are largely harmonious, sectarian discontent and violence have persisted. A political settlement to an armed separatist conflict in Aceh was achieved in 2005. Geography. Indonesia lies between latitudes 11 degrees south and 6 degrees north, and longitudes 95 degrees east and 141 degrees east. It is the largest archipelagic country in the world, extending from east to west and from north to south. According to a geospatial survey conducted between 2007 and 2010, by National Coordinating Agency for Survey and Mapping, Indonesia has 13,466 islands, about 6,000 of which are inhabited. These are scattered over both sides of the equator. The largest are Java, Sumatra, Borneo, New Guinea, and Sulawesi. Indonesia shares land borders with Malaysia on Borneo, Papua New Guinea on the island of New Guinea, and East Timor on the island of Timor. Indonesia shares maritime borders across narrow straits with Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Palau to the north, and with Australia to the south. The capital, Jakarta, is on Java and is the nation's largest city, followed by Surabaya, Bandung, Medan, and Semarang. Indonesia average population density is 134 people per square kilometre, 79th in the world. Although Java, the world's most populous island, has a population density of 940 people per square kilometre. At Puncak Jaya in Papua is Indonesia's highest peak, and Lake Toba in Sumatra its largest lake, with an area of 1,145 square kilometers. Indonesia's largest rivers are in Kalimantan, and include the Mahakam and Barito. Such rivers are communication and transport links between the island's river settlements. Indonesia's location on the edges of the Pacific, Eurasian, and Australian tectonic plates makes it the site of numerous volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. Indonesia has at least 150 active volcanoes, including Krakatoa and Tambora, both famous for their devastating eruptions in the 19th century. The eruption of the Toba, the supervolcano, approximately 70,000 years ago, was one of the largest eruptions ever, and a global catastrophe. Recent disasters due to seismic activity include the 2004 tsunami that killed an estimated 167,736 in northern Sumatra, and the Yogyakarta earthquake in 2006. However, volcanic ash is a major contributor to the high agricultural fertility that has historically sustained the high population densities of Java and Bali. Climate. Lying along the equator, Indonesia's climate tends to be relatively even year-round. Indonesia has 2 seasons, a wet season and a dry season, with no extremes of summer or winter. For most of Indonesia, the dry season falls between April and October, with the wet season between November and March. Indonesia's climate is almost entirely tropical, dominated by the tropical rainforest climate found in every major island of Indonesia, followed by the tropical monsoon climate that predominantly lies along Java's coastal north, Sulawesi's coastal south and east, and Bali, and finally the tropical savanna climate, found in isolated locations of central Java, lowland East Java, coastal southern Papua, and smaller islands to the east of Lombok. However, Cooler climate types do exist in mountainous regions of Indonesia above sea level. The oceanic climate prevails in highland areas with fairly uniform precipitation year-round, adjacent to rainforest climates, while the subtropical highland climate exists in highland areas, with a more pronounced dry season, adjacent to tropical monsoon and savanna climates. Some regions, such as Kalimantan and Sumatra, experience only slight differences in rainfall and temperature between the seasons, whereas others, such as Nusa Tenggara, experience far more pronounced differences with droughts in the dry season, and floods in the wet. Rainfall in Indonesia is plentiful, particularly in West Sumatra, West Kalimantan, West Java, and Papua. Parts of Sulawesi and some islands closer to Australia, such as Sumba, is drier. The almost uniformly warm waters that make up 81% of Indonesia's area ensure that temperatures on land remain fairly constant. The coastal plains averaging, the inland and mountain areas averaging, and the higher mountain regions. The area's relative humidity ranges between 70 and 90%. Winds are moderate and generally predictable, with monsoons usually blowing in from the south and east in June through October and from the northwest in November through March. Typhoons and large-scale storms pose little hazard to mariners in Indonesia waters. The major danger comes from swift currents in channels, such as the Lombok and Sape Straits. Geology. Tectonically, Indonesia is highly unstable. It lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where the Indo-Australian Plate and the Pacific Plate are pushed under the Eurasian Plate, where they melt at about deep. A string of volcanoes stretches from Sumatra to the Banda Sea. While the volcanic ash has resulted in fertile soils, it makes agricultural conditions unpredictable in some areas. The string of volcanoes runs through Sumatra, Java, Bali and Nusa Tenggara, and then to the Banda Islands of Maluku to northeastern Sulawesi. Of the 400 volcanoes, approximately 150 are active. The most massive supervolcano eruption was the Toba eruption that took place at the present location of Lake Toba, about before present. The supervolcano eruption is believed to have caused volcanic winter and cooling of the climate, and subsequently led to a genetic bottleneck in human evolution about 50,000 years ago. Between 1972 and 1991, 29 volcanic eruptions were recorded, mostly on Java. The two most violent volcanic eruptions in modern times occurred in Indonesia. In 1815, Mount Tambora in Sumbawa erupted, killing 92,000 people. Tambora produced the largest eruption known on the planet during the past 10,000 years. Also, the eruption created an umbrella of volcanic ash which spread and blanketed Southeast Asia, plunging it into darkness for a week, and made the whole world without a summer in 1815. The 1883 eruption of Krakatoa was one of the deadliest and most destructive volcanic events in recorded history. Nearly 40,000 deaths are attributed to the eruption itself and the tsunamis it created. Significant additional effects were also felt around the world in the days and weeks after the volcano's destruction. Biodiversity. Indonesia's size, tropical climate, and archipelagic geography support the world's second highest level of biodiversity after Brazil. Its flora and fauna is a mixture of Asian and Australasian species. The islands of the Sunda Shelf were once linked to the Asian mainland and have a wealth of Asian fauna. Large species such as the tiger, rhinoceros, orangutan, elephant, and leopard were once abundant as far east as Bali, but numbers and distribution have dwindled drastically. Forests cover approximately 60% of the country. In Sumatra and Kalimantan, these are predominantly of Asian species. However, the forests of the smaller, and more densely populated Java, have largely been removed for human habitation and agriculture. Sulawesi, Nusa Tenggara, and Maluku, having been long separated from the continental landmasses, have developed their own unique flora and fauna. Papua was part of the Australian landmass, and is home to a unique fauna and flora closely related to that of Australia, including over 600 bird species. Indonesia is second only to Australia in terms of total endemic species, with 36% of its 1531 species of bird, and 39% of its 515 species of mammal being endemic. Indonesia's coastline are surrounded by tropical seas that contribute to the country's high level of biodiversity. Indonesia has a range of sea and coastal ecosystems, including beaches, sand dunes, estuaries, mangroves, coral reefs, seagrass beds, coastal mudflats, tidal flats, algal beds, and small island ecosystems. Indonesia is one of Coral Triangle countries, with the world's greatest diversity of coral reef fish, with more than 1,650 species in eastern Indonesia only. The British naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace described a dividing line between the distribution of Indonesia's Asian and Australasian species, known as the Wallace Line. It runs roughly north-south along the edge of the Sunda Shelf, between Kalimantan and Sulawesi, and along the deep Lombok Strait, between Lombok and Bali. West of the line the flora and fauna are more Asian. Moving east from Lombok they are increasingly Australian. In his 1869 book The Malay Archipelago, Wallace described numerous species unique to the area. The region of islands between his line and New Guinea is now termed Wallacea. Indonesia's high population and rapid industrialization presents serious environmental issues, which are often given a lower priority due to high poverty levels and weak, under-resourced governance. Issues include large-scale deforestation and related wildfires causing heavy smog over parts of western Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore, overexploitation of marine resources, and environmental problems associated with rapid urbanization and economic development, including air pollution, traffic congestion, garbage management, and reliable water and wastewater services. Deforestation and the destruction of peatlands make Indonesia the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Habitat destruction threatens the survival of indigenous and endemic species, including 140 species of mammals identified by the International Union for Conservation of Nature as threatened, and 15 identified as critically endangered, including the Bali starling, Sumatran orangutan, and Javan rhinoceros. Much of Indonesia's deforestation is caused by forest clearing for the palm oil industry, which has cleared 18 million hectares of forest for palm oil expansion. Palm oil expansion requires land reallocation as well as changes to the local and natural ecosystems. Palm oil expansion can generate wealth for local communities, but it can also degrade ecosystems and cause social problems. Indonesia has a below-average, but slightly improving performance in the Global Environmental Performance Index, with an overall ranking of 107 out of 180 countries in 2016. This is also below average in the Asia-Pacific region, behind Thailand, but slightly ahead of China. Government. Indonesia is a republic with a presidential system. As a unitary state, power is concentrated in the central government. Following the resignation of President Suharto in 1998, Indonesian political and governmental structures have undergone major reforms. 4 amendments to the 1945 Constitution of Indonesia have revamped the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. The President of Indonesia is the head of state and head of government, Commander-in-Chief of Tentara Nasional Indonesia, and the Director of Domestic Governance, Policy-making, and Foreign Affairs. The President appoints a Council of Ministers, who are not required to be elected members of the legislature. The 2004 presidential election was the first in which the people directly elected the President and Vice President. The President may serve a maximum of 2 consecutive 5-year terms. The highest representative body at national level is Majelis Permusyawaratan Rakyat or MPR. Its main functions are supporting and amending the Constitution, inaugurating the President, and formalizing broad outlines of state policy. It has the power to impeach the President. The MPR comprises 2 houses: Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat (DPR) with 560 members, and Dewan Perwakilan Daerah (DPD) with 132 members. The DPR passes legislation and monitors the executive branch. Party-aligned members are elected for 5-year terms by proportional representation. Reforms since 1998 have markedly increased the DPR's role in national governance. The DPD is a new chamber for matters of regional management. Most civil disputes appear before Pengadilan Negeri. Appeals are heard before Pengadilan Tinggi. Mahkamah Agung is the country's highest court, and hears final cessation appeals and conducts case reviews. Other courts include the Commercial Court, which handles bankruptcy and insolvency. Pengadilan Tata Negara to hear administrative law cases against the government. Mahkamah Konstitusi to hear disputes concerning legality of law, general elections, dissolution of political parties, and the scope of authority of state institutions. And Pengadilan Agama to deal with codified Sharia law cases. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.